Hey everybody, it's me, your buddy Admiral Teague. How you doing? I just saw the movie Captain America Brave New World, or maybe it's Captain America New World Order, or possibly Captain America 4. Or probably should just be called The Adventures of Sam Wilson Falcon Man. That's right, the long sad tale, the making of this movie is finally over, and we can get on to its ultimate fate at the box office, which, at the moment, doesn't look very good. How did things get this bad? Well, the movie was written a few years back and then shelved for a while. While it's sitting there, the world just kind of changes, and they need to rewrite, re-edit, and reshoot this thing, and they don't do a good job of any of the things I just listed, starting with writing the actual movie a few years back. The problem from which all other problems stem is the ripped from the headline nature of the story of this movie. Because it was delayed, we've overrun the freshness date on the issues and it's not that topical anymore. That's when they start second guessing it and rewriting it and reshooting it, trying to fix this movie that was fundamentally misguided from the start. Invariably, when I see a movie these days, people's first question is always, well, was it woke? In the case of this movie, the answer is, not really, but it sure wanted to be. The reshoots and the rewrites have defanged the movie to a degree, but the woke elements are still in there in the movie's core. For instance, no male character in this movie really accomplishes anything on his own. They do a slightly better job of lampshading the woke elements than usual, but in this movie, what they do is every male character has a female helper who sort of guides them in the right direction. When Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is angry or impulsive or doing something wrong, that's on his own volition. But when he's being more reasoned or going against his worst instincts to do the right thing, that's because his female helper, Leela, has told him what to do and corrected his moral compass. President Ross's other female helper, Ruth, is going to get reassigned to Falcon so she can womansplain a few things to him and we can make it to the end of this movie. And with that, we're into spoiler territory, and I'll give you everything on the movie now, but if you could do me a favor, please hit those like and follow buttons, turn on the notification bell, and consider leaving me a comment to help my channel grow. I'm an independent reviewer, and I'm going to call it like I see it. Despite the bot swarm that was visited upon me by whoever it was who was so staked into this movie, they came after my live stream the day of the premiere. Thank you for listening, and here's how the movie goes down. We start out with President Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, now played by Harrison Ford, practicing his speech. And if there's a positive in this movie, it really is that Harrison Ford's performance is pretty good. It's not the performance we get in 1923 where he's really strong, but it's not the Harrison Ford of The Force Awakens or Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's a far better performance, and it's a shame that it's in such a bad movie. When President Ross makes a speech and addresses his supporters, there are very positive slogans behind him, and it seems like maybe he's going to be okay, but the overall implication is he's not such a great guy, and he's got some demons that are going to turn him into a pretty bad president. To catch us up, the movie uses the modern equivalent of the spinning headlines plot device, which is simply a news broadcast embedded into the beginning of the movie that catches us up and tells us what they want us to remember from the world's most insufferable TV show, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. In another speech later in the movie, at the beginning of what I'll arbitrarily take a guess at and call the movie's second act, Harrison Ford's character gives his agenda and spells out our stakes. I'm Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. We need to get to this island from the movie The Eternals because it's the most important thing ever 5 years after the movie failed. Celestial Island is made of adamantium and it's in the middle of the Indian Ocean. We've got to go there and protect it from the militarily expansionist Japanese. Yeah, that's right. In this movie, Japan is really hostile towards the United States. And, just go with it. It's far from the dumbest thing in the movie. What can I tell you? We've got to protect Celestial Island from the Japanese Navy and refine that adamantium and make sure that no one else gets it. That's your movie. Everything else revolves around that. As for the Falcon, Sam Wilson, hey, guess what? He's in this movie too. He's got some new gear from the Wakandans, vibranium wings, and he's pawned off his old stuff on secondhand superhero extra derivative Joaquin, who calls himself New Falcon. That's our superhero team, and they're going to need some help from Ruth soon to figure out what's going on. The dialogue is terrible throughout this movie. At its best moment, it's merely bad. Sam's relationship with Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is kind of nebulous, but all we can really tell is at first it seems like it's written to have Harrison's character take like almost a fatherly interest in Falcon. Sam seems to have no real interest in having a good relationship with the President of the United States, and he's not too happy when he's more or less told by him to get the Avengers back together because we need them. He's sort of like he's being drafted to serve in a very unpopular war. In boss fight number 2, it's Falcon and New Falcon versus the Serpent Gang, and it's Giancarlo Esposito as Sidewinder and his pal Copperhead. The fight ends with Falcon apparently deleting Giancarlo, and that seems like that's going to be it, but it turns out he's okay because later on he's incarcerated and shows up for like part 2 of his cameo. That's all you can really call it. And, they're being employed by the bad guy of this movie. To that point, our bad guy is Tim Blake Nelson playing Samuel Stearns. He's been contaminated with the Hulk's blood, and then Ross has force-fed him more gamma radiation in an experiment of sorts. There's a lot of that sort of stuff going on in this movie. Another hangover from the show is Forgotten Cap Isaiah. He's another Captain America from the 1950s. But the government never acknowledged his heroics and instead threw him in jail for decades. Now he's got a deep disdain for the government and a personal anger towards Ross. Yeah, that's your representation because he's also black. Sam decides the best thing he can do is take angry, psychopathic jailbird Forgotten Cap Isaiah to the White House to meet his nemesis, Thunderbolt Ross. What could go wrong? This is where Ross gives the second speech, the one about how important it is they get the adamantium before anyone else. Forgotten Cap Isaiah has somehow smuggled a gat past White House security, and he tries to delete Thunderbolt Ross right there. And that's when we realize that this movie is giving off something weird but familiar. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. Something about all this was sort of familiar. When we saw weapons drawn in the Oval Office and Secret Service agents protecting a president from a supervillain, and we see the set-piece fights in the most iconic parts of downtown D.C., because that's the most creative thing they pulled off in this movie. They decided that instead of New York, they would destroy Washington, D.C. So D.C. residents, if you wanted to see the most iconic parts of your city destroyed by dim-witted superheroes and their equally dim-witted supervillain opponents, this is the movie for you. That's when it came to me. The movie's giving off bad X-Men movie energy. Remember the X-Men movies? Think about just the bad ones, like Last Stand. The ones that didn't work because they'd been recast too many times, or there was one too many rug pulls that didn't work. It felt like that because of the setting. The movie's in Washington, D.C., so when you have a vaguely unsatisfying movie that's depending upon the goodwill built up from previous movies to not make sense and just make it to the end, that feels like the failed X-Men movies. So there's a familiarity to it, and the worst parts of the old Fox MCU have made it to the Disney MCU. Congratulations, guys. If there's a character that really embodies this movie for me, it's insufferable girl boss Ruth Bat-Saraf. She allegedly was going to be some stunning and brave Israeli superhero, but that was changed to make her a black widow who was simply placed with the Israelis in a move that I'm sure has nothing to do with the current political climate. She's amazing and has no problems taking down 4 grown-ass men who can't lay a glove on her without breaking a sweat. No one bothers to use their ranged weapons. Apparently, she can scramble your brain too. This actress is not convincing and can't overcome her casting. She is about 4 feet tall and weighs like 70 pounds, and the movie still has her one-punching guys left and right. The fight at Celestial Island is the centerpiece of the movie action-wise, and it's where we start to see Ross being tempted for the first time through some sort of ESP from Stearns to turn into the Hulk. It turns out that Stearns is every voice that Harrison's ever heard inside of his head. Sound familiar? Yeah, we've gotten to Rise of Skywalker evocations. It's so bad. Captain Falcon and Associates managed to stop the two navies from clashing, but it's only at the expense of a lot of lives. It's at this point that you realize that aside from the Serpent Gang earlier on in the movie, most of the people who are serving the bad guy agenda are actually mind-controlled good guys who are dusted off left and right by our heroes with no real regard. They don't react to the humanity or the lives that have been taken in their boss battles, and they write off the people who are under the mind control of Stearns as just part of the problem, who are bad guys and acceptable collateral damage. No one really remarks on them or feels bad. There's no attempt made to save anybody from this. And really, you gotta say to yourself, for want of a few Magneto helmets, this whole plan wouldn't have worked, right? Because it's all ESP. Stearns' plan for revenge, because again, of course, it's for revenge every single time, takes out more good guys than any punitive plan to date, and it's done by the other good guys. So there's your morality in this movie. Just like in Wakanda Forever, when we found out that all the people that we dumped into the ocean on that boat where we were looking for vibranium in that terrible movie, they were all U.S. soldiers and CIA and sailors and ostensibly good guys looking out to do the right thing, because these movies seem to just have an extremely dim view of the United States of America. By the time we make it to the end of this movie and a final boss fight with the Red Hulk at the White House and the area around it, because of the interference of Stearns, who hacks the White House systems for the third time in this movie. Joaquin hacks the White House closed-circuit TV earlier in the movie, and the White House is basically the least secure place in the entire world. Over the course of the movie, we've seen Thunderbolt Ross taking some pills here and there. And it turns out that these were co-opted by Stearns and contaminated with gamma radiation with which he's been poisoning the president. This is built up in his system to the point that now, if you mess with him enough, he'll turn into the Hulk. So now the movie's ramping up for its final finale and boss fight, and what happens is Stearns hacks the White House PA during yet another exciting speech by the president. He gets into the White House PA and starts playing incriminating audio of Ross saying some untoward stuff. At the same time, he gets into Ross's head and mentions the dark cloud that's hanging over him, his daughter Betty, and the fact that she won't talk to him since the events of Manhattan 17 years earlier in another Hulk movie. And it's at this moment you start to think, maybe they should have gone with the Eric Bana Hulk movie, since that one didn't make any sense at all anyway. So we shoehorned Liv Tyler into this movie as a voice on the phone earlier, and we saw her heavily obscured on the TV talking about how, she kind of cares about her father. And underneath all this pressure, he finally snaps. He turns into the Red Hulk. We get our final battle, and Sam's able to subdue him, because of course. And the movie ends by saving the worst for last. At the end of this movie, we have the President of the United States in jail, in a jail cell, in a prison jumpsuit, with a black man gloating to him. That's when the movie sort of pulls the woke punch, and instead of really coming down hard on Ross, Sam basically says that he's proud of the president for what happened after the boss battle ends, and that he had taken responsibility and apologized and allowed himself to be taken to the raft so he couldn't hurt anybody because he felt bad. But that can't undo the part where we have a president of the United States in jail. That's when the movie throws its final cameo at you. Liv Tyler walks up to the door of the president's cell and he speaks to her, and you see it from the perspective you would if you were looking over Hannibal Lecter's shoulder at Clarice. So she's looking towards him, you see her, and you see, a lot of reflected light, and you see, him and his environment, and you see about half of Liv Tyler's face and the top of her shoulder, I guess, and that looks more or less the same. So, that's it. You get your Arwen cameo, and they have a talk about maybe down the road they'll figure out that he's not such a bad guy. So a little bit of redemption for bad guy. If you think it's worth $20 to see Harrison Ford playing a broken, beaten president being shamed in jail, then this is the movie for you. It's so much worse than that, and I could go on twice as long as I already have, but that's the main reasons why this is a movie that I just wouldn't recommend. Try to see it for free on TV down the line. If you see it for free, it's automatically just a little bit better, but this is a terrible movie filled with just pipe dreams and really extremist agenda that is best forgotten. Skip this movie. Anyway, I really thank you for listening to my review. Thanks a lot, and please, like I said, leave me a comment. It helps out. Have a good one. I'll see you out there.